This episode may contain stories of domestic violence. Please be advised. Welcome to the Sage Advice Podcast, where each week we sit down with people just like you who have left abusive relationships and found healing. Don't forget to check out our website, sage.community, because together we can survive abuse with grace and empathy. Now sit back and get comfortable. The Sage Advice Podcast starts right now. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Sage Advice Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to check out our social media at Our Sage Community. We've got a lot of things going on, different challenges in the Facebook group. So you can find us at Our Sage Community on Facebook. So in the past, on our shows with Kay and Eva, we have talked to them about how each of them navigated parenting their children after leaving toxic or abusive relationships. Today, we're going to go a step further and talk to Emily Agee, who is a youth and family services advocate for an organization in the Richmond area called Hanover Safe Place. Emily works directly with youth to help them navigate their emotions, and she also has some very insightful perspectives that I think can help all of us, especially the parents out there. So without further ado, please help me welcome Emily to the show. Thank you for being here, Emily.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So why don't you start off? Hanover Safe Place is a victims advocacy group here in the Richmond area. So why don't you just start by explaining what groups like you do, what Hanover Safe Place is, just so people know.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hanover Safe Place is the sexual and domestic violence agency for Hanover County. So we have a variety of services that we provide to survivors of sexual and domestic violence, and that can look like a lot of different things. So we have a court advocate who is there to help people come in when they're writing like their affidavit for their most recent incident. They're there. That person is there to help support them through that. We have case management to connect our clients with the resources in the community to make sure they're getting the help they need. We have a counseling team. We have a shelter for imminent danger, people who are in imminent danger. And then, of course, we have me, where I work with the children and families to help support them in any way that I can. And, we have other resources as well, like we have outreach and prevention, where we go out into the community and make sure they're aware of what our survivors are facing.
That's great. Do you know if there's organizations partnered with you or connected with you around the country?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have there's the YWCA of Richmond. They serve survivors in Richmond. There is Safe Harbor in Henrico, Goochland Cares in Goochland, Project Hope /Thrive. Unsure of the areas they serve. I think there's like King William is one of them.
Okay.
But the EmpowerNet Collaborative is we're all connected via the hotline. So if you call the hotline, which is 804-612-6126 for the greater Richmond area, they will direct you to whatever resource center is closest to you.
Great. No, that's really helpful. I know that's something we talked about in victims advocacy training is that, you have that one central number so that people know the right place to go, because there is difficulty when it comes to jurisdictions, if there's any criminal proceedings. So it really is helpful. And, if you're not near the Richmond area, which a lot of people who are listening are not, the YWCA is a great resource. It's in a lot of areas. But really, Google is your friend if you need some help in the victims advocacy arena. So what made you get into this line of work of helping children in this way?
Yeah, so I graduated from Randolph-Macon with a degree in psychology, and as part of my degree program, I had to do an internship, just to complete an internship. So I did one through Hanover Safe Place, where I did my internship in the spring of 2017. Where I got a feel of what they do for the community and things like that. And then I actually started working there in 2018 as the Children's Services Coordinator. So my program has grown. My title has changed since then. But that's how I found Hanover Safe Place, was through an internship through college. But I also find the work to be very rewarding because of my own personal experiences. So it's really cool to know that these resources exist for people that went through some things like I've been through. But it's also, very rewarding to help those people find those resources as well.
Yeah. I didn't even know resources like this were out there until I needed them.
Yeah.
And, I'm happy that you being the children, youth, family coordinator is coming on, because honestly, I don't have children. And so that's something I didn't think about is, I needed help and assistance, but I don't have children. And of course they would need help and assistance. So what are the different ways where you become involved with, a child and helping them out?
Yeah, so a few of the referrals that I receive are typically through our court advocate. So if somebody comes to get a protective order, she will tell them about my services, refer them to me. And then there's also our case manager and our counselors. I usually get families from all different services that we provide. But so they send me the referral. I'll get in touch with the family. And for the parents, I'm working with them to connect them with resources. So that could look like connected them to WIC, preschool resources in the area, different things like that. And then when it comes to working directly with the children, my goal is to provide them with the skills that they need that typically don't get taught. Kind of how you said, like, you didn't know about these resources, and so you needed them. No one really talks about healthy relationships or unhealthy relationships, what those look like, and how to identify emotions and things of that nature. So my goal is to be able to provide them with those skills. So if they were to encounter some kind of a relationship that could possibly put them at harm, they're able to recognize those red flags and figure out, like, oh, this is not a safe space for me, and kind of things of that nature.
So when you get referred a case, is it always, they've been witness to domestic violence, or is it all different types of potential abuse that come through your doors?
Yeah, all kinds. I've worked with families where, the parents are almost positive that their children have not seen or heard anything, which is very likely almost always not the case. If they're not seeing the abuse, they're likely hearing it, or they're at the very least feeling the tension that can cause. And that puts stress on their own bodies, and that stress impacts development. There's a lot of research out there that talk about how experiencing or witnessing domestic violence as a child can really impact your development. And it's considered an adverse childhood experience. So the more adverse childhood experiences you have, the higher likelihood you have of experiencing negative health effects. So it's definitely a variety of cases that we see. I kind of approach them all with the same concept of helping them, identify those emotions. Like they may not realize that they're feeling fear when they're experiencing something or hearing something in their homes. So we talk about different things or different situations that might provoke that fear and how to handle that when you know what it is you're experiencing. But we do have, kids that have no idea what's going on, are unsure of who I am and what I'm doing. I've had families refer to me as their friends, like, hey, you're going to hang out with my friend today and you're just going to talk about some stuff. So it varies on what level the parent has disclosed to them who I am and what I do, on top of what their experience has been.
Is this voluntary from the parent side, or do you also have, the legal system saying that you guys need to be involved?
That's a good question. I don't know that I've had anyone say that they have to be working with me. I think it sometimes looks better if they are, but I've never had somebody, legally have to see me.
Okay. So you mentioned before, as we were prepping, that the kids do groups. What's the benefit of doing that?
Yeah. So I have a children's group that, pre-pandemic, we would have an intimate partner violence support group that our counselor holds. And then alongside that, they would bring their kids in if they, had kids that they wanted to come to the group. So the benefit of that is that depending on how much they know about why they're there, is that, they're not alone. They know they're not alone. They might hear something or see something that makes them realize that they're not the only one going through this, and that this fear or whatever it is that they've experienced as a result of witnessing what they've witnessed, that they're not alone in that. And that can be very powerful.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, we're all here today because we're adults and we need to lean on somebody and, connect with other people. So for children, I'm sure that they carry around a lot of secrets when it comes to how their home life is. And it's really great for them to have an outlet here. Do you find that most kids open up or talk to other kids about what's going on?
I personally have not seen much of that. I think it also depends on the survivors' situations, because sometimes we'll have clients that have left their abuser and they're coming to group as a result. Sometimes they're still with their abuser and they're trying to gain the skills and the confidence to be able to leave. So a lot of times, we might have a family show up 2 or 3 times and then, they fall off the grid and we don't hear from them for a while, because it does on average take 7 times for someone to officially leave their abuser.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, so it can look very different. I think that's one of the biggest things is that they might come, they might be seeing me, and then they might stop and I might not hear from them. They might continue to see someone else, like within the agency. So they may still be getting counseling, but they're not necessarily seeing me anymore. And I think that depends on their situation. And I think saying no or, asserting themselves can feel like an overstep to them because of their experience. So instead of saying, hey, I don't think we're going to meet with you anymore, I just kind of stop hearing from them, which is, that's normal for us. That's normal for, the work that we do. But my goal is to make sure that they know if they do decide to come back, I'm still going to be here. I'm still happy to provide whatever resources and services that I can for them.
It's nice that there's an open door policy, because I'm sure that that's not something they don't feel a safe place often. But I also know it's probably, it's hard enough to leave, and having kids in there is just
absolutely
makes it that much harder for sure. So do you do work with families as a whole too? Or how can the parents get involved with you and then outside of what you're doing with the kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my goal is that what I talk about with the kids and the sessions that I have with them is going to be, those conversations are going to continue to happen outside of, our one-on-ones. So what I've been doing is I'll talk to the parents afterwards and say, hey, these are the topics that we covered today, in case they have any questions or, need more support. And I'll also send them a handout that goes into more detail of what we do. So one of the things that I do the first thing that I do when I have a kid hop on for our one-on-one is to do the 5 senses grounding technique, which is something for anxiety. And, have them look around the room, list 5 things they can see, 4 things they can feel, 3 things they can hear, 2 things they can smell, and 1 thing they can taste. And we do that every time so we can practice that and get in the habit of doing that. So that way, if they are feeling anxious or, whatever emotion that they feel they need to use that for, they're able to do that. So I send the parents what that looks like, so they're able to help them with that if they ever need it.
Yeah, it's something that we're talking about more now in, I think more of a technology world, is the importance of going outside and putting your feet in the grass and
grounding,
and listening to the birds, and teaching kids that that's really important to calm them down. I totally understand that. Hey guys, it's Erin. I'm interrupting this episode real quick just to let you know to check out the website sage.community. We've got some great new meditation classes up and a lot more to come. We'll talk to you soon. And now back to the episode. So as you were talking, I was kind of thinking what advice or what's something that you would want parents to know that the kids are telling you that maybe they're not telling them?
Yeah, I think so. One of the activities that I do with the kids that I work with is I'll have them draw a star on their paper. They'll write their name inside the star, and I have them write down all of the names of people who care about them around that star. So they have a visual representation of who cares about them, but they also helps the parent know who the child feels like cares about them. And I will say that it is uncommon that the children will write down the abusive parent's name on that sheet, depending on, where that family is at with their journey. If they've, left them and they're working on their healing process after leaving the abusive situation. I don't normally see kids write their abusive parent's name down. And I think that is representative of just how much the kids are aware of what's going on. Especially the younger kids, their brains are like sponges. They're going to pick up on any little slight change. They're going to look, their babies look at you to learn how to respond to things. So I think the biggest thing is that they see and they hear and they experience a lot more than I think parents are aware of.
Yeah, they may not have the words for it yet, but they have
Right.
the feelings and they can't
Right.
attach it to the words because they're just not mature enough yet. But I'm pretty sure they could always recognize the feeling. Absolutely. So do you have a lot of kids that, go through and you do get to see them for a while and have everything turn out successfully?
Yeah. I've had a few kids that it has been an honor to see their growth. It's even more, I want to say impressive, but that's not the case because children are the most resilient people I've ever met. But it's affirming when we talked about one topic and they come back later and they're like, oh, hey, like this happened. Was this something that I had to do for my safety, or like, is this something that I can and can't consent to? And I wish I could put it into words how good of a feeling it is to know that they are actively thinking about that outside of the sessions where we talk about consent. But that's one of the things I wanted to mention. I think with the work that we do, we, experience a lot of vicarious trauma. We definitely carry our clients' trauma around. We always talk about self-care. And one term that I think I learned probably last year was vicarious resilience, and seeing the resilience in our clients and especially kids, and being able to carry that resilience around based on what we see from our clients. But that's one of the best reasons I love working with kids, is because they are so very resilient.
We talked a little before, as we were prepping for this, about teaching kids to set boundaries. And that's exactly what, we're doing as older people. We're still learning how to set boundaries with people. How does that conversation go? How do they learn and how to set boundaries? Because maybe I can pick up some pointers.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, especially if we don't learn it in childhood, it makes it even harder to do in adulthood. I know, like you said, you're working on setting boundaries. I'm also working on how to set those boundaries and how to stick to them. But for kids, I think it depends on their age. I'm currently working with a lot of kids between the ages of like 9 and 12. And so for them, it's more about personal boundaries. And so we talk a lot about, I have this kind of like a bullseye thing that I pulled from it's like a youth TED Talk.
Okay.
And she's talking about like the inner circle is your comfort zone, there's your learning zone, and there's your panic zone. And so with them, I talk about, like what are some things that might fall into your panic zone? And it might be someone driving down the road and asking you if you want to ride. That would, obviously fall into the panic zone. So just kind of setting or planting that seed in their heads that you're allowed to say no to anything. You are not required to do anything for anyone except for like when you're younger and like taking medicine you have to do because it keeps us safe. Holding your parent's hand in the parking lot, that's there to keep you safe.
They cannot get out of Robitussin if they even make that. I don't even know if they make that anymore, but they can't get out of it.
Right. So it's about teaching them what they are allowed to say no to. Like, I think the biggest thing that we hear about is saying no to hugs from the family. Like, it might hurt your aunt's feeling if your kid doesn't want to give them a hug, but they don't have to. It's their body. They're allowed to say no if they don't want to hug somebody. And I think the biggest part of that is respecting when your child says no to help reinforce that idea of boundaries. So that's part of what I do is talk with them about, comfort zone, learning zone, panic zone, and just kind of talking about different things that they would feel comfortable with or they would not feel comfortable with. And that varies depending on, who you're talking with.
Yeah, man, it's interesting to bring up because that was just something that was expected when we were younger, is that you hug your older relatives. And, especially if a child has already been through trauma, that could be really a negative experience for them. So I'm glad you brought that up because it's something that I think is commonplace to a lot of people and expected, but it could be very hard for a kid. You don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I definitely think that is a conversation that's coming more and more normalized is, if your kid doesn't want to hug somebody, don't make them, because if you keep doing that, they're going to have this idea that they're not allowed to say no to things that make them uncomfortable.
Right.
So.
Very interesting perspectives. So do you find that, boys are easier to work with or girls? Is there a difference when it comes to gender?
I haven't seen that yet. I would say, I think because the kids I work with are still in elementary school, I feel like those kind of gender roles I don't see as often. But I think, normally it's that, definitely the double standard of, what consent and healthy relationships look like for the genders. I can't say off the top of my head that I've seen that, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah. And it may be, maybe something that's changing generationally. There's a lot of things that are changing in the world right now. So it might not be as, where guys are supposed to be stoic and they can't cry. That was just a curiosity I had when we were talking about that.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. So do you also refer kids out or to counselors, or is it mostly, kind of this working with you is what they do, or what do you guys recommend anything?
Yeah. So typically, if I'm working with a family specifically and they say, hey, do you have any suggestions for counselors? I'll look into that for them and see if there's anything in their area that would be beneficial for them. But typically if they're looking for counseling, we'll refer them to the counseling department. The director of counseling, have her, she probably has a lot more connections and resources in that area. Since what I do is not counseling, I think that is a common misconception with what I do. What I do is more educational. But if we're working with a family and they're asking for a specific resource, we'll do whatever we can to see what resources are out there for them and what would be best for them.
It's a really important distinction because some people have an aversion to counseling. Other people, really love it.
Yes.
And so it totally depends. So you're doing more educational. So does that mean worksheets or games to kind of teach kids? Is that how you're reaching them?
Yeah. So what I do is, definitely more educational. We're not really actively processing what they've experienced. I have different resources, especially books. I do a lot of books. One of the books that I've read more often than not is Consent for Kids. And I think it is by Rachel Bryan. And it talks about, kind of the stuff I've been saying about boundaries and consent, red flags, doing things that are meant to keep us safe, even though we can't say no, but we might be able to have a little control over that situation. Like, you have to take this medicine, but you can choose to take a breath or take a couple seconds before you take that medicine. How to help a friend who is trusted adults in your life. So if you do experience something that makes you uncomfortable or somebody that crosses your boundaries, who you can go to in those situations. But I use a lot of books. I use a lot of online resources. There's one that I've been using more recently since the pandemic. It's called Flippity. And there are tons of different things online that I use. I use a lot of TED Talks, videos, things of that nature. So yeah, the difference is that we're not actively processing what they've experienced. It's more so like, hey, I know you've been through this. So here are some tools that you can add to your tool belt to kind of help you through it.
I like that because I think it's something that parents could also do, if you've left the abusive situation and you're trying to help your kid, that's definitely something that they could try. I know when Kay was on and she was talking about her son and having to go to counseling already when he was young, but I think that's a good addition to counseling, but getting them in early is probably the best.
Yes. If you can get counseling, I highly recommend getting it. I know I'm actually working toward getting my counseling degree currently. So I am aware that not all counselors are good counselors. I have had a lot of people in my life that have had really negative experiences with counseling. And I think I would, for that, encourage someone to keep trying, find somebody new. There are good counselors out there, and counseling can make a huge difference in your healing journey.
Yes, it made a huge difference in mine, but I have, like you said, I've seen some that really didn't, or I didn't connect with, and that can go for adults and for children. If they're not connecting, then it's just not the right person for them to help them through. So I'm glad we were able to talk about some resources that we can buy on Amazon or, find on the internet to help. So that's really important. What, we're actually getting close to the end. I told you it would go fast. Yeah. But what advice do you have from your perspective for parents who both are in the current abusive relationship or a parent that has left one?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say for parents, access whatever resources you have to you. I think one of the hardest things that, especially a parent, is that asking for help. I think that can be one of the hardest things to have to do. There's a lot of shame attached to asking for help, which is, I think it's really, really important to ask for the help that you need, because that support is there for you. Lean on it, use what you can. And I think for parents and regarding their kids, I think that it's important to start those conversations about healthy and unhealthy relationships as soon as possible. There are age-appropriate resources to talk to your kids about what those look like. And that could just be, talking with kindergartners about what a healthy friendship looks like. Do you want a friend that bullies you? Do you want a friend that talks about you behind your back? So they are able to know what their boundaries are as early as possible. And, resources out there about talking with your kids about domestic violence and what that looks like. I think it's also important to draw attention to it and talk about it than to assume that they don't know. Because there are different ways that you can talk about it so they understand what's going on, and they, don't have to sit in that anxiety with, knowing that something is off, but not having any skills or tools to deal with that. So I think ask for help, have those difficult conversations as early as possible, and lean on those support systems that are in place to help you through this.
Yeah. And again, I'm not a counselor. You're not a counselor yet, but I would think the worst thing to do would be to ignore it and think that your child is okay and not, if you're not okay, likely they're not okay.
Yeah. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Emily, and giving us some really great information for parents and for kids and trying to help them through this really hard time too. And thanks for doing all the work you do in victims advocacy. Yeah, it's awesome.
Absolutely. There was one more thing that I wanted to plug, if that was okay.
Of
course. So Hanover Safe Place has just started a teen leadership program. It is called Upstanding Youth Advocates for a Healthy Hanover. So this program is open to any high school aged teenagers in Hanover County, and it is to provide them with the opportunity to teach their peers about, dating violence, teen dating violence. And that information is on our Facebook page, Hanover Safe Place. And then you can also find more information by emailing Elena Brooks Perkins at community@hanoversafeplace.com.
Awesome. That sounds like such a great idea. We talked about stalking a few episodes ago, and young people have the highest rates of online stalking and physical stalking. And I'm sure it's better coming from their friends than from a parent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're here for the prevention. Hopefully stop it before it begins.
Yeah, I think the more education, is part of the reason why I did this podcast is if we can help the people who are survivors, that's amazing. And I want to do that. And I also want to help people just educate themselves so they're more aware of these types of relationships, and they can help set their own boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And everybody check out our website, sage.community. We've got some new meditation classes up, and hopefully you will have a peaceful rest of your week. Have a great day and talk to you later. Thanks, everyone. Well, that's our show. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or if you're willing to share your story, please email us at sageadvicepodcast@gmail.com. Until next week, remember, when you're kind to yourself, the healing can begin. See you next time.
This show was brought to you by inflowradio.com, the best curated talk radio network for personal development, wellness, spirituality, and conscious business.
If you or someone you love is in immediate danger, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. For more information, please see the resources tab at sage.community.